Hey everybody, I'm Pam Bondi coming to you from Washington, D.C., sitting in for my good friend Laura Trump following the birth of her new baby girl, Carolina Dorothy Trump. The media assails President Trump as being erratic and unfit, yet he seems to be the only world leader who's actually achieving peace and prosperity for his country. Joining me with the Trump Leadership Update is the president of the London Center for Policy Research, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Tony, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Pam, thanks for having me. It's always great to be on, and congratulations to Laura and her new bundle of joy. It's always great to have a new life.
Beautiful baby girl. President Trump headlined another G7 summit this week in France. Listen to this, Tony.
This is a truly successful G7. There was tremendous unity. There was great unity. Sometimes I'd read a little bit of false reporting, and I will tell you there was, in fact, we would have stayed for another hour. Nobody wanted to leave. We were accomplishing a lot, but I think more importantly, we were getting along very well.
This was another great opportunity for the president to display his leadership, don't you think, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. What the president describes as good-natured getting along is actually chaos, because essentially everything he's doing is forcing them to go along with what he wants. And I think this is a necessary step of putting the United States back in the leadership role, which frankly was completely abandoned during the previous administration. Pam, what's important here is that the president is actually trying to find a way to bring the enhanced economy we're experiencing, to these other nations, and they're resisting. The reason they're resisting is because they have been so committed to central planning, to the idea of government being the lead element of prosperity. They cannot think for themselves, nor do they understand the need to have an open and free market that will benefit all the people. And I think President Trump made that abundantly clear during his comments, during every meeting he had. And I think that's why it's so important for him to not only lead America, but America first doesn't mean it's America only. It's America leading firstly to actually help the globe, help our allies and friends become more prosperous as well.
And that's what our president does best, isn't it? I mean, but then you go to the media's portrayal of the president, and it's so out of touch with reality. Listen to this one, Tony.
What, if anything, do you think the president accomplished at this G7 summit?
Well, it's not clear anything, really.
Isolated and alone on the world stage, the president wasn't leading at this G7 summit, but he was misleading.
It was less of a G7 and more of a kind of G6 plus one.
And these people are Americans. Isn't this another example of the left wanting the president to fail more than they want our country to succeed, Tony?
Oh, absolutely, Pam. This is complete insanity, and let me answer that question by 2 points. First, this Dr. Francis from Drake University attributing more deaths to Donald Trump than Stalin, Hitler, Mao. I'm surprised he didn't throw in Pol Pot for good measure. This is the level of insanity they're trying to do to attack the president directly, personally, to dehumanize him. Secondly, to the point of the commentary by the media. The president has made it very clear that our prosperity is a national security issue, and you'll see this reflected by my colleague Stephen Moore and others who work with me to essentially tell the story of what's going on. The president has made it very clear that it is in our interest to reestablish our industrial base, to re-energize our manufacturing, so that those abandoned by the Democrats are now empowered to be part of the global economic community. This is a huge issue. The London Center, we're getting ready to do a study to review some of the very core issues of maintaining a robust industry. And Pam, that's the key. The industry that we have must interact and sell things to the rest of the world. That was not something that was being done. So now you see the media reflecting their venom for the fact the president is trying to re-energize the American workforce, to put America's capabilities on the stage front and center. So It's completely appalling. You've seen the so-called mainstream media completely diminish and attempt to demean the president to the point of being completely irrational, which I think is going to greatly backfire them next year during the elections.
And attempt is the right word, because they are not getting anywhere. The American people see right through it. In fact, none of the other countries in the G7 summit, they can even begin to boast of an economy like we have. But they're, but are they likely to follow President Trump's example?
No, unfortunately, this is part of the issue, and this is why you see such friction. I watched the comments during the press conference after the conclusion of the G7. And it's interesting that many leaders, to include Mr. Macron of France, I think are very envious, and they kind of hint at the fact that they want to interact with the United States, with America more directly, but are not willing to do so because I think it would require them to abandon, Pam, their aspirations, their political aspirations regarding how their economy should work versus how it does. I think our best bet is actually working with the British in a lot of the things we're doing with their economy regarding Brexit. I think there's great opportunities. And the other thing, Pam, he's done is China. I think China is a big issue where he's basically being able to push them economically based on their own weaknesses back to the negotiating table. No small issue. And I think China is going to be far more prominent in issue regarding how he's successfully dealing with them than we fully understand at this point in time.
And Tony, what you said about Brexit and China is so accurate, and about President Macron. I mean, what France is actually doing is working against our president on his maximum pressure campaign against Iran. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, not well. I mean, look, I think we've now seen serial violations of the so-called joint agreed upon framework by the Iranians, and the Europeans cannot sit back and ignore that. My good friend, Ambassador Rick Grinnell, has been leading this in Europe, trying to get the Europeans to pay attention to this issue. And I think the president selected the right people to work this. And unfortunately, it's going to take some time to convince Macron and others in Europe of the necessity to support the very strong line against Iran. And Macron even commented in his own comments at G7 that it's necessary to get the Iranians back to the table. Well, the best way to do that, Pam, is for Macron to follow the president's lead and let us work that pressure point with the French, not have the French working against us.
That's exactly right. And, talking more about China, too, that, as you said, that was a major focus of the G7.
Right.
And how much of that is the president's leadership and fortitude? That's such an asset in this showdown, don't you think?
Right. Oh, I do. Now, the president understands better than other leaders the vulnerabilities. As a businessman, the president understands the vulnerabilities that China faces externally regarding their growing economy. They can't, Pam, they're much more vulnerable than we are to the economic winds of change. Their entire economy is based on their need for unlimited amounts of fossil fuel. If not for the Middle East, China would not be the industrial giant it is. You cut that off, they fail. And I think we recognize their vulnerability, as well as the fact that as we cut back our interaction with them selling us cheap stuff, and we give them the money for that, there's other options. Vietnam, Japan, and other Asian nations have immense manufacturing capabilities. So, we don't need China to be sending all of their goods to the United States. We have alternatives. These points, I think, the president has made very clear to the Chinese that as the more they struggle to maintain their dominance of the economy, the more they will face their own economic ruin. And I think this is the key to the president's very strong, very consistent leadership on pushing the Chinese to understand their own vulnerabilities. Nobody wants to see China fail. With that said, China is not going to maintain its economic dominance of the United States economy by the fact that they will not do the right thing and work with us to do the balancing.
And Tony, that's so right regarding China. And not only that, President Trump is holding China and President Xi responsible for the flow of fentanyl and drugs coming into our country as well. So it's all inclusive, everything he's doing, not only for America, but for the entire world.
That's right. Look, Pam, the president understands that everything is linked, everything is important. And again, as I said earlier in the interview, America First does not mean that we are the only ones who will benefit from President Trump's leadership. It's trying to essentially push forward the basic ideas of fairness, of economic success for all. And frankly, that's the interest that we have economics, our success economically, the prosperity of the United States is a national security issue, and the President recognizes that, and I'm very proud of the fact that he's doing all the right things to keep it going.
And so are many Americans. Tony, thank you for joining me, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
The G7 was another stage where the world can see the best example of leadership from Donald Trump that's delivering peace and prosperity for the American people. That's the real news for today. I'm Pam Bondi from Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, everybody.